Welcome, new and old friends. My name is 242, and tonight, 42 has brought us some chilling stories of people you don't want to meet. One about how even friends can be terrible, and the other about a sweet grandma that's a bit more sour than we thought. So, let me give you some chills as you make sure you're safe and sit back and listen to the stories from Let's Not Meet. Best friends can be abusive too. I'm posting here as I think I'm finally ready to tell my story. I moved to Sandwich in Cheshire, England about 3 to 4 years ago with an ex. Him and I had broken up by this point, but we were just friends in a house we were renting and everything was great. We weren't hostile towards each other and found out we were better friends than in a relationship. I started going out to the bars and local shops to make some friends and to see if anyone was as lonely as me by this point. I had moved from Cheshire, London to be with my ex, and I didn't know anyone there. That's when I met Craig. Him and I became friends quickly. He was a little odd, had family in the area, and his own flat. So, my ex moved away back with his family, and I couldn't afford the rent on my own. So, Craig and I rented our own house in Worcestershire, where his dad lived. His dad would be a 5-minute drive away from the house we settled at. Him and I were just best friends. We didn't do anything romantically, sexually, and he always had a few poor girls in tow. He would tell each of them that they were the one for him, and he loved them, etc. He had a sound of 7 girls on the go at one point. I started seeing this guy Jay. He would stay over a few times and would eventually become my boyfriend. Craig hated it. We would argue about him, the fact that why should he even care? Him and I were only best friends, and he needed to stay out of my dating life. It was then things got physical. One night, Craig literally got on top of me in my own room, put his knees on my arms, and started to strangle me. He was saying things like, "Where is he now?" And I honestly thought I was going to die. My brain switched to my mom, who was 4 to 5 hours away, and she would never know or would have to come identify the body of her only child. I don't know what it was, but I managed to kick Craig and I ran. He had double locked the front door, he had hidden my bag, and he had smashed my new iPhone that I had gotten from my parents for my birthday. I was literally running down the stairs with him in tow, yelling how he was going to kill me. I knew the back door was open from him having to smoke earlier, and there was a garden gate. All I needed to do was open that. I ran for it, opened it, and made it. The next thing, I'm out on the street in short shorts, a pajama top, and bare feet. I just ran. I ran for a good half an hour towards the town and used a payphone to call 999. The police picked me up. I couldn't get back into the house as Craig had my door key. I told them the story. They took me to the station. Had to unlock it. It was well past 1 in the morning by now. They took photos of my neck that had been bruised and my head that was bleeding where he had smashed me into the kitchen wall earlier. I had to sit in a patrol car to go to my house, and they picked Craig up. He was on the street looking for me. I had to point him out and say, "That's him," to them. He said he was looking for me and he was worried for me. I don't think that's true. I think he was looking for me to silence me so I didn't tell anyone. They arrested him, and I got told he would stay in the cell overnight, and a policeman let me into my house as they used a key Craig had. While I was in the house alone, I gathered my things. I left my laptop, some clothes, shoes, and makeup in the rush. I thought I could easily replace them, and I just wanted to get away, and I was so worried he would come back any second through that front door. I had no purse, no money, no phone. My parents, they lived 5 hours away. Thankfully, I don't know why, but I had the sense to hide my car keys in my bra earlier that evening. I got into my car and drove to a gas station. I was bleeding from the head, no shoes on, and bruised. I finally broke down there and used their phone to call my mom. At first, she was annoyed that I had woken her up, but then I explained everything to her. She ended up putting 200 euros in a Petro cashier account for me to fill my car up, get some food and a hot drink to calm me down. I then drove to my parents. I later got told through a friend of a friend that Craig got released in the morning as it was his word against mine, and he smashed my laptop when he found out I wasn't home anymore. Whatever. My stuff got replaced, and I'm now with an amazing guy who treats me like a queen. Sometimes I get flashbacks of the night where I truly believe I could have died. As for Craig, I blocked him, deleted everything to do with his family and him, changed my number, and even broke off friendships with friends that knew me and him. Please, let's never meet again, because this time, I'll be ready for you. A grandmother from my preschool stalked and threatened to kidnap me. I recently learned of some chilling details about a person that was heavily involved in my life as a child, and I thought I would share the story. Throughout my childhood, I was extremely shy and did not find myself going out of my way to make friends in new settings. I had recently started preschool at my grandmother's church, and I remember being on the playground playing by myself when a woman introduced herself to me. Her name was Candy, and she looked like any other sweet old lady. She almost reminded me of my own grandmother, with her abundance of white curls on her head. Candy was a volunteer at the church and typically watched over the children while they played, so we would see each other fairly often. I can't remember much about the start of this friendship, but I presume one thing led to another before I frequently spent time with her in and out of school. My parents were grateful to have someone who was interested in watching me, as I was the youngest of 3. And my parents were working full-time while also taking my brother and sister to and from school, sports, or friends' houses, so having a helping hand was a blessing to them. To be honest, I don't remember too many details about spending time with Candy, but I suppose we spent our time frequenting ice cream shops, parks, etc. I do have one memory of going to her house where I had never been before, and as she was showing me around, I remember passing through the dining room and seeing another girl who looked around 10 to 12 years old. Candy introduced me to her and told me that she lived down the street and would spend a lot of time at her house. I am not sure why, but I remember being jealous. I guess I was jealous that Candy also cared for and spent time with another little girl. I had never felt that way before, and I'm not sure why I remember that so clearly. For some reason, that was the only time I went to her house. Fast forward a few years, and I'm in 1st grade. I had totally forgotten about Candy and had not seen her since I graduated preschool 2 years prior. My neighbors, who I carpooled to school with, had dropped me off at my house after school one day, and I spotted a Target grocery bag hooked on our front door. I wasn't sure what it could be or why my brother and sister didn't bring it inside when they arrived home from school an hour or so before me. Once I took it inside, I noticed writing on the bag indicating that there was a gift inside for me from Candy. I ran up the stairs to my room, and to my surprise, there were several adorable brand new outfits inside just for me. I immediately tried them on and was so excited to show my mom when she came home from work. After my mom got home, I eagerly showed her the new outfits Candy had left for me. Unfortunately, my mom was not as excited as I was. In fact, she was quite angry. She yelled at me to take them off and that she would be returning them to Candy. I was so confused as to why she was upset with me. What did I do wrong? These were free clothes, a gift. Wouldn't it be rude to return a gift to someone? To avoid being punished, I put the clothes back in the bag and handed them to my mother. We never spoke of this again, and Candy slipped from my mind for the next several years. A few years ago, my sister was home visiting from college. With nothing else to do, we decided to go to Target to shop for useless things we didn't need. As we walked through the parking lot, the thought of the Target bag from Candy randomly dawned on me. I proceeded to laugh and asked my sister if she remembered, and if she knew why my mom was in such an awful mood that day to force me to give the clothes back to Candy. My sister stopped dead in her tracks and said, "Wait, do you not remember what Candy did to us?" Taken aback, I shook my head and begged her to tell me what happened. She refused to talk about it and told me to ask my mom. Once again, the thought of Candy slipped my mind, and I didn't remember to ask my mother about what happened until I was in college a few years later. We were saying goodbye to my grandmother after grabbing lunch when she mentioned to my mother that someone's funeral was that weekend. They then sat in silence for a few minutes, just stared at each other. After my grandmother left, I asked my mother who they were talking about, and she informed me about Candy's death. The realization that I had never heard the true story about this woman crossed my mind, and I asked my mother about what my sister refused to speak on. My mother proceeded to relay the horrible story to me about this little old lady that tried to take me away from my family. At the beginning of our friendship, Candy generally was a big help to my family and was someone they trusted. However, Candy's intentions were questioned by my grandmother, who shared a few of her concerns with my father after hearing some odd stories from her friends at church. She felt as though something was off with Candy, and she didn't think that I should spend so much time with her. Coming from a woman who never had any negative things to say about anyone, my father became slightly weary of Candy, but he assumed that my grandmother was just being overly cautious. After some time of Candy watching over and babysitting me, her demeanor changed and she started acting possessive of me and becoming hostile towards my parents. She would show up unannounced to our house, asking for me, and if I wasn't there, she would become incredibly angry and yell at my parents about how awful they were. She would continuously tell them that they didn't deserve me and only she was worthy of taking care of me. This happened several times before my parents told her to stop coming to the house, or they would call the police. This inclined her to start calling the house and leaving messages for me, which my parents obviously would not tell me about. In these voicemails, she would cry to me and try to convince me to leave with her and leave my family. She would talk about how awful my parents were and how she could give me a much better life than they could. The voicemails that were intended for me soon turned to threats for my parents. She threatened to call the police or child services to have me removed from the home and placed into her care. She threatened to tell the police about my parents' violence and abuse towards me and my siblings, none of which was true. Once she realized that phone calls were not working, she began making efforts to show up at the house again. She started driving up and down our street day after day. She would ask our neighbors and then our neighbors' children if anyone knew if I was home or even where I was. She would park her car and watch our house without anyone really noticing or saying anything. Eventually, our neighbors began to recognize her car and what was going on, and they would inform my parents when she came around asking about me. After some time of doing this, she took it upon herself to come to the front door while only my brother, who was likely only 12 years old at the time, and I were home. And she started banging on the door, begging to see me. My brother opened one of the front doors, keeping the storm door between them closed, and told her to leave. She proceeded to plead with him to let her in, and he replied that I was not home, despite me napping soundly upstairs. Cheers for the smart 12-year-old brothers. Candy partially forced herself through the door when my brother put a hand in her face, pushing her out of the door, and told her that the police had been called. She left after that and distanced herself for a while before she encountered in the final straw with my mother. One day, my mother and I were backing out the driveway to attend a birthday party when Candy pulled in behind our car, blocking us from leaving. She came up to the window and my mother rolled it down, ready to tell her off for good. Candy ignored her and looked right past my mother into the back seat where I was sitting. She said to me, "Wouldn't you rather come with me and never see your mom again? I love you so much more than they ever did and can give you everything you want if you just come with me." This was the final straw for my mother. She never thought she would get upset or fight with an old woman, but that day had come when it was absolutely necessary. She screamed and yelled at her, making sure to include that Candy would regret the day that she ever came into contact with me or my family again. Something she said must have actually scared Candy because she drove off and didn't appear in our lives again until the Target bag incident. I'm not sure how I never knew any of this happened and never thought anything was weird about her when I was a child. But I guess my parents did a good job of shielding me from the horrors of the situation. After hearing about everything that took place, I assumed that there must have been a reason she became so obsessed with me. Did she not have her own family? Did she lose children or grandchildren and wanted to find someone to fill the void? According to my mother, she had several children that were much older than me, as well as young grandchildren. Thus, I'm not sure what would have sparked her interest in me, but thankfully, we no longer have to worry about her. Part of me still wonders if I repressed any memories or conversations with her that were upsetting. Did she ever privately talk to me about how awful my parents were, or how she wanted to take me away from my family? Did I ever agree to leave with her? I also wonder, as I grew older and joined social media like Facebook, did she ever search my name? Did she ever watch me when I was in middle school, high school, or even when I went to college? I have so many questions, but I'm so glad that we never had to find out if she was going to follow through with any of her threats. As a word of advice, always trust your grandmother's instincts about another grandmother's. Do not befriend an old woman volunteering on the playground. And finally, to the woman who made my parents' lives a living hell, let's not meet again. Thank you, 42, for those stories. The last one will make me look twice at a little old lady. I hope you enjoyed them, and if you did, I want you to hit that like button and make sure it feels it. If you'd like to hear more from me, then subscribe, and make sure you hit that shiny bell to turn it to all notifications. If you would like some bonus content from me, then check out my Patreon. Link in the description box below. With that, I wish you a good night and come back Thursday, because I believe 2 has some day stories for us. Sweet dreams, my friends.